Hello and welcome back to the Autocar channel. We are in the Scottish Highlands. It's really spectacular up here. You must visit if you can. We're here because we're driving the brand new Toyota Land Cruiser. We're going to do some off-roading, we're going to do some on-roading, but first let's take a look at what's new. The new J250 Land Cruiser builds on the basics of its J150 predecessor and a long line of Land Cruisers that started back in 1951. It retains a steel ladder chassis, but thanks to structural adhesive and more weld points, Toyota claims that the frame's torsional rigidity has increased by 50%. Suspension is still by double wishbones at the front and a live axle at the back. While previous Land Cruisers offered air suspension, the new car always uses coil springs with passive dampers. Adaptive dampers are available as an option in other regions, but not in Europe for the time being. There's a standard torsion center differential, and a rear torsion differential is available as an option. To maximise axle articulation, the front anti-roll bar has an optional disconnect function. Power comes from a reworked version of the outgoing car's 2.8-litre diesel engine coupled to a new 8-speed automatic gearbox. A mild hybrid version will join the range next year, and a full hybrid is available in other regions. A cheaper version with a manual gearbox was originally planned, but won't see the light of day after all. So at the front, I really love how this thing looks because it's kind of retro but still modern. It sort of reminds me of the old FJ Cruiser, but where that was a kind of America special, this is just the normal Land Cruiser. It's got 5 doors, you can buy it in Europe, it's got a diesel engine. It's very boxy compared to a lot of modern cars, but that has purpose because with these squared off wings, you can really easily place the car. You can see the edges of the car. And what they've done to help that is that these bits are kind of raised compared to the middle of the bonnet, and that helps you with being able to see the corners of the car. One other interesting bit about this is that you can have 2 different types of headlights. So this one has the square ones, which sort of reminds you of Land Cruiser of the 80s, but other trim levels have round headlights, which are a bit more 70s. So other utilitarian things are these fog lights. They're kind of recessed into the bumper so that you don't poke them out with branches very easily. And it's got these aerodynamic spats. They're necessary because it's a modern car, it needs to be aerodynamic, but they are deformable, so if you bash them about off-road, doesn't really matter. Moving on to the sides, again, plenty of proper off-road touches, like you've got a choice between 18-inch or 20-inch wheels. This one has 18-inch with off-road tyres, so they're chosen so it's a good size for common off-road tyres, and it means that you're not going to curb an alloy if you're going off-road. Then the windscreen is unusually flat and upright, which is not great for aerodynamics, but it lets you see out very easily, and it helps with the kind of retro look. And moving further down here, the belt line is quite low. Again, it's really good for visibility. It's 30 millimeters lower than on the old car, and just gives you that good view out, gives you that sort of Range Rover, top of the world kind of feeling. Around the back you can see it doesn't have the spare tyre on the tailgate anymore, that's now underslung, but it gives you a much more useful feature. So normally before it would have been just a door that goes open like this. Now it's a normal tailgate that moves up, but because electric tailgates are kind of slow and annoying sometimes, it's got a feature that I really love. You can press a button here and open the window by itself. It's the thing that BMW Tourings have had since the 90s. Now they've stopped doing it, and Toyota said, yep, we'll have that. One more detail is this, it says Prado. This is the kind of smaller Land Cruiser. There is a bigger 300 series Land Cruiser that you can get in America, in the Middle East. That doesn't come to Europe, and in other countries this is called the Prado, but for Europe it's simply the Land Cruiser. So inside, the old Land Cruiser was, in its basic design, I think over 10 years old, and it was charming in a way, but it felt very old. This one is completely new, it's a completely new design, completely new dashboard, and I think they've done really well. It's not a sort of BMW grade interior, it's got plenty of hard plastics, but that's what you want in a sturdy off-road car. That said, the design is really modern, fits with the exterior, and it's got all the modern technology. It's got a 12.3-inch driver display and a 12.3-inch center display. Lower grades will have smaller screens, but we haven't seen those yet. What I love is that they have retained a lot of buttons, and they've said this, it's useful if you're off-road, if you're wearing gloves. You can have the heated seats, you can have the climate control, you can have all the drive modes for the off-road settings. There's a button for the traction control, for the diff lock, you name it, it's all here. It's really well done. Like the old one, this new Land Cruiser is a pretty big car. It's grown slightly, I think it's now 4.9 meters. That means that you can have it with 7 seats as an option. This one is a 7-seater, so in the second row, you know, plenty of leg room. I'm 6'2". I could stay here for hours. There's climate controls for the back seats, no problem at all. Back seat is pretty reclined if you want it, so really nice place to be. Third row is going to be more for emergencies than for kids, but it's, you know, there's still a decent amount of space. Pull a lever, flip up the seat, pretty easy. Climbing in the back is a bit awkward, but again, if I put this down and back up, it's all right. It's fine for a drive to the pub or for kids, so it's very useful to have. So the new Land Cruiser looks great and is still a very practical vehicle, just with a bit more luxury and tech than before. But what really matters is how it does off-road. Now, a proper comparison test with a Land Rover Defender and a Ineos Grenadier will have to wait until later, but we did get to try it on a muddy forest trail. It looks like the weather gods have smiled upon us, because it was nice and dry when I did my intro piece of camera. I was standing outside the car, and now it's raining a bit, so it's giving the car a little bit more of a challenge, some mud. But basically, I mean, this is an event set up by Toyota, so they're not gonna send us somewhere where the car can't get through. It's overall a fairly mild off-road course, but it's still impressive how easy this car makes everything. I've put the off-road mode in the mud setting because it is quite muddy. That just manages all the traction control. It's in low range all drive mode with the center diff locked, but the rear diff is still unlocked. And what's quite interesting is that it's got this crawl control, which is kind of a off-road cruise control, and you just set it to a speed. Now got it on maximum speed actually, which is 6 kilometers an hour. Don't touch the brakes, don't touch the throttle, just does everything. I'm sure that the real off-road enthusiast will like stuff with proper levers and where you have to manage everything yourself, and if that's you, I think the Ineos Grenadier was built with you in mind. For everyone else, if you want to get through a bit of tough terrain with minimal fuss, this does the job. This is quite nice, the camera, it shows you kind of what's underneath the car, makes the car see-through, as it were. I'm not sure if I trust it 100% because the angles are a bit odd and there's some distortion, and right now there's clearly a drop or a bit of a leaf on the camera, so half of it is obscured, but it's still quite useful to see, especially if you're going over big crests when you just all you can see out the window is sky. It's quite nice to see what's coming up. And this ultimately has all the off-road hardware you could probably need. Some of it is optional. I think the rear locking differential is optional, as is the the sway bar, or the anti-roll bar disconnect. This car has it. We haven't needed it yet, but it's there for sort of cross-axle articulation things where you've got two wheels up in the air. And that's a lap of the off-road track. I'm sure this car will do much more extreme stuff than that. Not sure I would, but just makes it easy, no problem at all. We've done our mud plugging, so what's this thing like on the road? Well, first thing you notice when you start it up, first thing that strikes you is that this is not some little lifestyle polished crossover SUV. It sounds like a truck, feels like a truck, tries a bit like a truck in quite a charming way. But I'm sure a Defender would be a much more refined car on the road. Still has a 2.8 litre 4-cylinder diesel, and usually that kind of engine capacity you expect it to be a 6-cylinder, but it's a 4-cylinder, and you can tell it's a bit of a truck engine. It sounds very diesel-y. Maybe it's because I don't drive many diesels anymore these days, but especially at low revs, it's quite clattery, it's quite loud, and it sways at high speeds, but you always hear it. And if you accelerate moderately briskly, you get some vibration through the steering wheel, and I don't know if you can hear it well. It goes alright, it's not fast. It's fast enough for a car like this. The automatic is an 8-speed gearbox, torque converter. The old one on the previous Land Cruiser was a 6-speed. This is an 8-speed now. They say they've done stuff to make it more direct. They call it a direct shift gearbox, which kind of suggests that it's a dual clutch gearbox. It isn't. It has a torque converter, but it has lock-up clutches like any modern torque converter automatic, but they lock up a bit quicker than the old one, so it's a bit more direct, and you can feel that it's a good automatic gearbox compared to most modern automatic gearboxes in, say, BMWs. It is a bit slushy, but it responds well. You give it a little bit more throttle and it shifts down a gear. It doesn't like set the engine racing unnecessarily. In 8th gear, when you're cruising along, it's nice and low revving. Equally, you can feel that this is quite a utilitarian kind of car in the ride and handling. It's ladder chassis with a live axle, and you can feel that because it's ultimately quite softly sprung, so it takes bumps. It takes big bumps quite well, so it's not deflected or anything, and if you get some speed up, it's quite comfortable. But over bad tarmac, you can feel it bump and shimmy a bit, and some other cars do that better, like a Ford Ranger. You drive that and you think, oh, this is amazingly SUV-like. This is by no means bad. I think it's been a while since I drove the old Land Cruiser. I think it's a little bit better than that, and if you're going to use this car, what you're supposed to use it for, what it's built for, I don't think it'll bother you too much. Handling, same thing. It's not a sports car, obviously. The steering is, from memory, it's about 2.8 turns to lock, which for a normal car is a lot. For an off-roader is fine. An Ineos Grenadier, I think, is 4 turns lock to lock, and compared to that, this is so much more enjoyable to drive on the road because the steering is electrically power assisted. The old one had hydraulic because it was just an old design. This is electric. You know, who cares about steering feel and something like this? Steering quite light. It's precise enough, and even on the off-road tyres that this is on, it's got enough grip to give you plenty of confidence. No problem at all. Problem at the moment is that we don't have any price prices yet. This is quite an early drive. This is still a pre-production car. I think they said first deliveries will be in the third quarter of this year. The old outgoing Land Cruiser, I think the top of the range version cost something like £65,000, and I can't imagine this new one being any cheaper. And that sort of money is very close to a Land Rover Defender, which modern Defender is a very different car from old Defenders. It's got that 6-cylinder diesel engine, slightly nicer interior, bit more comfortable, rides better, bit better on the road, and for most users it's going to be just as good off-road. So why would you get this? Well, there is obviously the concern, the reliability concerns with Land Rovers, which Toyotas tend not to have. And I think if you're going to do really heavy duty off-road work, you might still have a benefit from the construction of this car, the ladder chassis, the live rear axle. I guess it's time to sum up. What do we think about this new Land Cruiser? Well, I really like how it looks. I like that it hasn't got any bigger. I like the interior. It's got the right blend of kind of soft materials and a bit of luxury and proper utility. I'm sure this dashboard can be bashed about a bit. There's plenty of buttons, there's plenty of USB ports, cup holders, all that stuff. It's got a more modern infotainment system, digital gauge cluster. They all work reasonably well. They've got their quirks, but this can't play. So yeah, it's quite roomy. You can get it with 7 seats if you need to. It goes off-road really well. It drives quite nicely for what it is, and ultimately that is kind of the main point to consider. Do you need a car that is this geared towards off-roading, towing? Because if you don't, there are cars that also look good and are just a bit nicer to drive on the road. For what it does, I think it's great. The price is going to be a bit of a question mark. Could be a bit expensive, and you wonder how many of these they'll be able to bring into Europe and the UK with ZEV mandates and the fleet CO2 averages. I don't know, it might remain a bit of a niche choice. That said, I really like it. It's a nice update of an icon. Drives well enough, looks cool. Yeah. If you want to see more videos of new cars, some old cars, group tests, stuff like that, be sure to subscribe, click the bell icon, and we'll see you in the next video.